For a very short season, I took flying lessons.
I can juggle, and I actually enjoy it.
I can solve a Rubik's Cube.
I love Starbucks. I love almost every single drink on that menu except for the pumpkin spice latte. Do not hate me for that.
Once I went whitewater kayaking in Scotland over a 30-foot waterfall and didn't do it successfully. Ended up needing to be rescued, and it took an hour and I had hypothermia.
I was actually kicked out of Maple Leaf Gardens. I asked the guy at the door if I could come in and just look around, and he said, yeah, but don't go on the ice. So we went in and we walked all around the gardens, and we got over to the penalty box, and the door to the ice was open. So I ran out and stood right on center ice where they dropped the puck and was kicked out of Maple Leaf Gardens.
I love cars, especially old muscle cars. My favorite one is a Shelby GT500 or Eleanor for Gone in 60 Seconds.
There's actually a videotape out there of me as a 2-year-old falling in a toilet.
I have a collection of over 30 sweaters.
Contrary to popular belief, my son is not named after Peter Parker.
I used to do triathlons, sprint distance triathlons, and I hope to do an Ironman one day.
I love the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I'm pretty sure that I can beat Scott one-on-one in basketball.
I've watched The Office 5 times.
My favorite place in the whole world is a beach. Any beach, as long as there's a body of ocean around me.
I didn't drink coffee until 5 years ago, and now I roast my own beans.
My first name is not Alan. My first name is actually Stanley. I was named after my grandfather on my mother's side, who was Stanley Blanchard. And they wanted to name me after him, but they also really wanted to call me Alan. But they didn't want to call me Alan Stanley Summers, because every time I would write my initials, I would be writing, you guessed it. So they loved me enough to make it Sass instead of...
Yeah, there you have it. Well, this past week we've been sharing videos with you via Facebook and in our Friday email. Those videos being videos of the new pastoral staff team, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of see who they were, and hopefully you got a chance to watch those videos, get a glimpse into who these people are, a little bit of their personalities. And at the end of each of those videos, they shared some fun facts about themselves, some of which you just saw there. And I felt a little bit left out because I didn't make a video for me, and so because I didn't do one, I didn't really get to share any fun facts about Scott. So I thought just to kind of kick off this morning, I'd kind of have some fun and kind of peel back the curtain and share some fun things about myself. So to kick it all off, my favorite color is pink. Yeah, it's all right. Favorite color is pink. I prefer salty snacks to sweet snacks. So like, you can keep your ice cream and your chocolate and all that kind of stuff, but give me a bag of chips and we'll be friends forever. So that's just the way to Scott's heart, give him a bag of chips. And my name, up until the day I was born, my name was Jeffrey. My mother, in those days, they didn't know, if they were having a boy or girl, and so they had 2 names picked out. My mom was either going to call me Samantha if I was a girl, and if I was a boy, she intended to name me Jeffrey. And then when I was born and she held me in her arms for the first time, she said, he doesn't look like a Jeffrey. I don't know what look a Jeffrey has, but apparently I didn't have it, and so she instead named me Scott, which I'm fine with now. I don't like Scotty. If you want to start a fight, you call me Scotty, and we're going to have, problems. But I'm okay with the name Scott, but early in my life, probably around the age 8 or 9, I hated my name. So much so that I actually went to my mom and begged her to change my name. I didn't want to be called Scott. I wanted to be called Jesse. So I went to my mom and I'm like, listen, I don't want to be called Scott anymore. Make this happen. And unfortunately, I didn't make enough in allowance to get legal representation to make that happen. And so Scott just kind of stuck, and here we are today. So those are some fun facts about me. Aren't you glad you came? And fun facts about Scott. But as I said earlier, when everybody was up here on stage, it's an honor. It's an honor to be in this place, to be called of God, by God, and then to have that affirmed by this congregation. And so many of you have been so encouraging over this whole transition process. I mean, I've had so many of you email or text or call in. Some of you have taken me out to coffee, out to lunch. Many of you have stopped in to see me and talk with me. Others have pulled me aside in the lobby and just kind of offered words of encouragement and support. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. Because quite honestly, when I look at my life and where it is right now, and Lisa would be the first to tell you, I'm still kind of in shock that we are where we are. Like, it's still hard for me to believe we are where we are in life and that the things that are happening in us and around us are actually happening. I say that in all honesty because there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, There was a time in my life where the thought of a day like this actually happening was something I never thought possible. I never thought it was possible. And I'm not talking about the idea of introducing a new staff team, though that was exciting and it's a thrill for me to be able to do that. I can't wait to get working with these amazing people, these individuals who are so incredibly talented. They're wonderful people, amazing families. I just can't wait to work and to minister and serve with them. I'm really excited about that opportunity. And I believe with all my heart that this community, like my life, and I believe your life, will be better for the impact that their ministry is going to have on us. But that's not what I'm talking about. And I'm not even talking about this opportunity to succeed Alan and step into this new role as lead pastor in July. Like, I'm not even talking about that. There was a time in my life where the idea of being in ministry in any capacity, the idea of being in ministry was something I never thought would ever be a part of my life again. Never. Now, it wasn't always that way. I mean, when I started out in ministry, I was convinced that I was called. There was no question in my mind that I was called. And 19 years ago, I started a journey in ministry that has led me all over North America. It started out leaving New Brunswick, where I was born and raised, and I moved from New Brunswick down to Florida, where I pastored for a number of years, which was a lot of fun. It was kind of like Beverly Hillbillies, East Coast edition. It was kind of like take a guy from a small town in New Brunswick and move him on down to Beverly, St. Petersburg, that is. And so I went there for a number of years, and that was a lot of fun, and my ginger skin got burnt many times than I can tell. And then I moved from Florida, and I moved on over west to Colorado, and Colorado was an awesome experience. It felt a little bit more like home. I mean, people would ride up to church, with gun racks in the back of their truck, and that just felt a little more natural to me. So I had a lot of fun pastoring and serving in Colorado, and then I left Colorado and moved up north, just west of Santa's Village in Yellowknife, and spent a number of years in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, freezing my tail off. So I've kind of done the gamut, and then obviously ended up here. But it was as different as all those experiences were, and as unique as those environments were, it was amazing that at every stop along the way, I just had this amazing opportunity to serve a community and to pastor in the context of the local church, to preach and to build relationships with people. It was an incredible experience, and I didn't know how much I loved what I did until I didn't do it anymore. See, there was a series of events that happened in my life, and almost 8 years ago, I stepped away from pastoral ministry. I walked away from my calling and stepped back, and I wasn't working out my calling within the context of the local church anymore. And almost 8 years ago, I moved to Canada, and when I got to Canada, I knew this is where I was supposed to be, where I was meant to be, but I didn't know any more than that. And I had a really hard time finding a job. I mean, all my education and all my experience was in the context of the church, and so it was really hard to find a job. But thankfully, after a little bit of searching, I got a job working at a funeral home in the city, and that was a unique experience. I mean, of all the things that I've done in pastoral ministry and all the churches I've worked in and all the places I've done it, nothing was more of a culture shock for me than coming out of the church world into the funeral business. I mean, I had spent the last 10 years of my life preaching hope and preaching life, and now I found myself surrounded by death. And it was so unique and such a different experience. I spent my days driving around in a big black van alone. Well, not really alone, but you get the drift. The good news about that was I always got to pick the radio station, which was great, but that was about where the good news ended. I mean, I was lost. Honestly, I was alone, and I was lost, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, what do you do when everything that you know, everything that you are, everything that you think you are is gone? What do you do? And some of you have been in that place in your life where everything fell apart, where everything that you knew and everything that you were all of a sudden in an instant was gone, and you didn't know what to do. You didn't know in that moment who you were anymore or what you were going to do moving forward. Everything was just different. Everything was lost. Everything was gone. Some of you are in that place right now. Some of you are going through a season like that right now in your life. Maybe it's in your marriage. Maybe it's in your career, where life is falling apart around you and you don't know who you are anymore. You don't know where to go from here. You don't know if things could ever be any better. You find yourself in this place. And maybe there's some of you who have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, and you can't relate to that at all. And if that's true, if that's you, then the rest of us would say, well, get ready, right? Get ready. Because every so often you'll go through a period of your life that seems like all you are is being wasted. Every so often, you'll go through a period of your life that seems like all you are is being wasted. And you'll find yourself thinking thoughts and questioning yourself and wondering what your future holds. You'll find yourself feeling like you aren't living up to your highest potential. It'll feel like you're living beneath your calling. You'll look at yourself in the mirror and you'll say things like, I should be more. And it'll eat away at you. Every so often, you'll go through a period of your life that leaves you feel like all that you are is being wasted. Every so often, you'll go through a period of your life where you find yourself clinging to the memory of what was, not knowing or believing that what's in front of you could actually be greater than anything that you're leaving behind. And if you're not careful, secretly, you'll see yourself as a failure. Secretly, you'll see yourself as a failure, and you won't be able to see that where you are may actually be the very place that you need to be. You won't be able to see that where you are, as unknown as it is, as frustrating as it is, as painful as it is, as scary as it is, that where you are may actually be the very place that you need to be, and may be the very place that's leading you to your calling. You won't be able to see that. And no one is a better illustration of this than Moses. Moses, a man in the Old Testament who many of us, if not all of us, have heard of to one degree or another. Moses is a man who kind of grew up in the lap of luxury. He's a man who is a Hebrew person, and while his people, the Hebrews, are out in the hot sun serving as slaves to the Egyptians, Moses is chilling in the palace, getting fanned and fed grapes. I mean, he's living in the lap of luxury. He's in the seat of the Egyptian empire, that he's up under the mantle and the covering of an Egyptian pharaoh whose daughter has fallen in love with the baby Moses and chosen to raise him as her own son. And as a result, Moses grows up in this incredible palace, and he gets the best of everything that Egypt has to offer. He loves where he is. He loves the environment that he is, and he can see very clearly what the future holds for him. Moses had it all. And then he didn't. See, a series of events happened very quickly in his life, and it climaxed with him actually killing another Egyptian man. And because of his actions, he now has to act. He has to run. He has to flee. And he leaves the palace, the marble floors, the gold columns, the delicious grapes, the wine that was being served to him, the people that bathed him, the people that trained him, the people that educated. He has to leave all that, run from it, leave it behind, and he runs into the desert. From the palace to the desert, a dry place, a barren place. He leaves the palace, and now all of a sudden he's in the midst of the desert. And he doesn't realize that while he's running from his past, he's actually running into his purpose. That while he's escaping how he was once defined, he has no idea that he's actually running into a new identity, one that he's never had before. And this is a big deal for him because he doesn't know that in the moment. I mean, it's easy for us because we can read his story, we can see how the story ends, and many of us know how the story ends and know what Moses did. We kind of forget the fact that in his moment, in his reality, in his present, he doesn't know what's going to happen to him. He doesn't know what's going to happen with him. He doesn't even know who he is, and this has always been an issue for Moses. I mean, Moses grew up a Hebrew, but he didn't grow up with the Hebrews. He was a Hebrew man who grew up with the Egyptians. And he's too Hebrew to be Egyptian, and he's too Egyptian to be Hebrew. His identity has always been an issue for him, but now he doesn't know who he is at all. He is alone in the desert. He doesn't even know who he is at all. He finds himself wandering in the desert in this new environment that he's never been in. And he doesn't have any survival training for the desert. I mean, this is a guy who grew up in the palace. He doesn't know where to get food. I mean, he's completely out of his element. His whole life has been other people feeding him, and now he finds himself in a desert looking around going, I don't even know what plant to eat, right? Like, how do I get water in this dry place? He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know about going to cactuses and trying to cut one open to find water. I mean, he has no survival skills, no training. He doesn't know what to do. He has to learn everything all over again because his life is in a brand new place. He's in a new place. And has life ever put you in a new place? Has life ever put you in a new place, this new environment, in this new reality, in this new situation, in this new season of your life, and you have absolutely no idea how to survive, how to work within this new reality that you find yourself in? Moses wandered the desert, and God let him wander in the desert for 40 years. Are you encouraged? He wandered in the desert for 40 years. God let him just wander and wonder in the desert for 40 years. And finally, he comes upon a group of people known as the Midianites. So he meets these people and he meets their leader. His name is Jethro. And fortunately for Moses, Jethro takes him under his wing and he kind of walks him around. He says, don't eat that. That'll kill you. And he kind of shows him some survival skills. He shows him what to eat and what he should eat, what he shouldn't eat, how to get water, how to survive in this dry environment, how to shield himself from the sun. And over time, they build this bond, they build this relationship, and eventually Moses marries Jethro's daughter. And so Jethro, rather than having a son-in-law who mooches off of him for the rest of his life, Jethro comes alongside him and says, hey, listen, I've got some work for you. Got some work for you. And one day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. Moses, mighty Moses, the man we know who would overthrow an Egyptian empire. Moses, the man who would lead the people out of slavery, out of bondage, and across a Red Sea that he parted and to the promised land. Moses, the man who was portrayed by Charles Heston in the movies, the guy who in his hands, God put the 10 Commandments in his hands is now a shovel, and he's using it to shovel sheep dung for somebody else's sheep. Are you kidding me? Do you know who I am? I'm Moses. I grew up in Pharaoh's house. I am a prince of Egypt. I don't work. Moses had never worked a day in his life. He'd never worked a day in his life. He's got rings he doesn't need and robes he can't wear and an education that is completely useless in this new environment he finds himself in. This isn't that. This isn't that, and success in that area doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be successful in this new reality. Not everything in your life is transferable. Not everything in your life is transferable, and when you come into a new arena of your life, when you step into a new reality in your life, you have to humble yourself. You have to humble yourself and become a student all over again. And here's Moses, a prince of Egypt, now tending someone else's sheep and shoveling sheep dung. And here's the test. Here's the test. Can you do what you have to do wherever you find yourself? Can you do what you have to do wherever you find yourself? Can you do what you have to do? Can you learn what you have to learn? Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter who's over you, who's lording over you, who your boss is, whether or not they deserve or that position or not. Can you do what you have to do wherever you find yourself? Can you get what you need to get and learn what you need to learn and do what you need to do so that you can step from one level to the next level? And Jethro tells Moses, his son-in-law, he says, look, I want you to lead my sheep. I want you to just lead my sheep. And he does. He led the flock far into the wilderness, and he came to Sinai, the mountain of God. And my guess is along the way, he had conversations with those sheep like I had with those people, my friends, in my big black van. Because that's what isolation does to you, right? When you're isolated, you find yourself doing really weird things. You start having conversations with yourself. You have arguments with other people in your mind. You ask yourself questions to which there are no answers. It's the things that you think when no one's around. It's what you think about when you're laying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling. What am I going to do? What is he going to do? What is she going to do? What's going to happen? What if this doesn't work out? Where are you, God? And Moses in this moment finds himself questioning himself. Who am I? What am I? I thought I was that, and now I'm this. He is in the desert. He is alone. He's isolated. And then all of a sudden, he has an epiphany. He just walks right into it. He wasn't expecting it. He wasn't working towards it, wasn't even praying for it. He just kind of walks into it. It catches him completely off guard. He wasn't expecting it. Suddenly, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement, though the bush was engulfed in flames, and it didn't burn up. Wow, right? Suddenly, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement, though the bush was engulfed in flames. It didn't burn up. Suddenly, out of nowhere, completely unexpected. Wasn't planned, wasn't premeditated, it just happened suddenly, out of nowhere. Friends, God is the master of suddenly. God is the master of suddenly. Suddenly, the angel of the Lord appeared to him. "This is amazing," Moses said to himself. "Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it." And that's what suddenly does, right? Suddenly completely catches you off guard. Suddenly blows your mind. Suddenly makes you question. Suddenly takes your breath away. Suddenly leaves you shaking your head, not believing what you're seeing. Suddenly makes you stop and shake your head and not believe that what's happening to you is actually happening to you. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush and he said, "Hey, you with the long hair and the stinky sheep, come here, I want to talk to you." No. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, "Moses, Moses." God called him by name. And if you follow his story, which I would encourage you to do, even if you know the story and you've read it 100 times, go read it again because it's powerful. God called Moses by name and he used Moses to lead not sheep, but people, and not just any people, his people, out of bondage, out of slavery, out of captivity, and to the promised land. And that's the part of the story that many of us, if not all of us, know to varying degrees or another, how Moses led the people out of slavery and across the Red Sea, and we know that part of the story. And that's the wonderful part of the story, but the part that we forget, the part that we just read over really quickly, the part that we don't really stop and think about and reflect on is the fact that he wandered the desert for 40 years before his name was called. He wandered and wondered in the desert for 40 years, not knowing what the future held for him, feeling like his whole life was a waste and living with the regret and the shame of what he'd done and what he'd been through, having no idea that suddenly was just around the corner for him. Suddenly was just around the corner. And he wandered the desert for 40 years, but everything that he'd been through led him to what he had to do, so he could do all he was called to. Everything that he'd been through, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that he'd been through led him to what he had to do in the moment so that he could do all that he was called to eventually. And friends, this is so important. Nothing that you've been through will be wasted. Nothing that you have been through will be wasted. Nothing you're going through will be wasted. Suddenly, your life can turn and take on a whole new meaning. It won't be a gradual thing. It won't be, there's no, evolution to a revolution. It will be suddenly, out of nowhere, completely unplanned, catch you completely off guard. It'll be one phone call, one meeting, one person, out of nowhere. Suddenly, your life can take on a whole new meaning. Take it from Moses. Take it from Moses. But maybe you can't. Maybe you can't. Maybe you're not sure you believe that story. Maybe you're not sure you believe in God, the Bible. You're kind of like, I don't really know. It sounds good. It's a little too fairy tale-ish for me. I get that. So if you can't take it from Moses, take it from me. Take it from me. Chris shared with us so powerfully last week. If you weren't able to be with us last week, I'd really encourage you to go onto our webpage and watch Chris's message last week. One of the things he talked about last week is the idea that there is nothing and no one that God can't use. There's nothing and no one that God can't use, that you were created on purpose, for purpose. And for those of us in the room this morning that would call ourselves followers of Jesus, we'd say that we're a Christian. I encourage you, wherever you are today, lean into where you are. Lean into where you are, and no matter what it is you're doing, and no matter where it is or who you're doing it for, lean into where you are and be faithful in this moment. Be faithful in this moment and get all you can and can all you get and do all you need to do and get all that you can so that you can be prepared for your suddenly. that take, those discouraging moments and take those discouraging experiences and take those thoughts captive and fight through the discouragement and keep reminding yourself, I am a child of God and I'm created on purpose, for purpose, and I need to be faithful in this moment. I need to be faithful in this season of my life because my time will come, even though I don't know when that will be. Be faithful wherever you are, whatever that means, and whatever you're doing wherever you are. But for some of you this morning, believe me, I understand you aren't sure you can do that. You aren't sure you believe that. You're here in church, but you're not really sure what you believe about God, about Jesus, about even life, let alone purpose. I mean, life is random, Scott. I mean, that sounds good, but life is random. This is too TED Talk-ish for me. Life is random. It's full of chance, and it's full of coincidence. And I get that. Believe me, I get that because I, for a lot of my life, believed the very same thing. See, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I didn't grow up going to church, and I believed for a long time in my life that there was no God. I believed that there was no God, and the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing today with my life is a shock to a lot of the people that knew me growing up, even to my mother. Even to my mother, when she sees what I'm doing with my life, and she's like, wow, I never saw that coming. But a number of years ago, 19 years ago, to be exact, when I first started out in ministry, I got a letter in the mail. It was a letter from home. And in it, there were two pieces of paper. And I have them with me this morning. One of them, the first one, is a piece of parchment paper. And so I looked at it and I read it. And it says this. It says, Scott, a traveler, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. This was in that envelope. And then there was a handwritten letter from my mother that I'd like to read a little bit of to you this morning. It says, Dear Scott, this was September 18th, 2000. Dear Scott, I found this Scott thing in your baby book. I bought it shortly after you were born. It's really strange reading it now. I mean, when you read it, I think that you'll understand too. God's plan, much love, Mom. See, though there were many moments in my life where my choices and my actions derailed God's purpose and calling in my life, and even though there were moments in my life where the choices and the actions of other people derailed God's plan and God's calling in my life, suddenly, I find myself standing before you today. And my name is Scott. It's not Jeffrey. And sadly for 8-year-old me, it's not Jesse. My name is Scott. And I am a traveler. And there's a calling on my life placed on me by my Heavenly Father to preach the gospel long before my mother gave me my name and long before she stopped by the gift shop in the hospital to buy this piece of parchment paper. And even though 8 years ago I was certain my ministry and my calling was gone, suddenly I find myself standing before you today. A living, breathing man full of faults and failures. A man with a lifetime of shortcomings and regrets. But a man who has a Heavenly Father who has called him and chooses to use him despite himself and despite his past. A man who believes with all of his heart that the same is true for you. A man who believes with all of his heart that suddenly is just around the corner for you. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter how you got here, I believe with all of my heart that because of who God is and all that He has done, suddenly is just around the corner for you. We are the sons and the daughters of God. We are the sons and the daughters of God. And even though our parents gave us our names, our Heavenly Father created us on purpose, for purpose, and there is a calling on your life even though you can't see it because of where you are right now. So I encourage you, in fact, I challenge you to be faithful where you are, to do all you can do where you are, to get all you can get where you are, to lean into where you are and be faithful because suddenly suddenly is just around the corner for you.